It's week 3 of the NFL season, and here are my predictions for this week. But first, how did I do last week in my predictions? In week 2, in wins and losses, I was 13-3, and with the spreads, I was 8-8. And before getting into the video, please make sure you subscribe so you don't miss another video, and help me hit my goal of 1,000 subscribers. Kicking off the week on Thursday Night Football, we have the 0-2 Dolphins versus the 2-0 Bills. The Dolphins are coming off a 33-27 loss to the Patriots, where in that game, Tua went 26 of 32, 315 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Then they really struggled running the ball, having 61 yards as a team, but Tyreek Hill had a good game with 6 receptions for 109 yards. Then for the Bills, they're coming off a 30-10 win over the Jets, and Josh Allen didn't have to do much at all in the passing game because they ran the ball so well. He was 14 of 25 for 148 yards, and James Cook led the team with 132 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns, and as a whole, the team had 224 rushing yards. And on defense, they ended up with 4 sacks and held the Jets to just 154 yards. So far this season, the Dolphins have really struggled on defense, and the Bills are just flat out one of the best teams in the NFL. And the Bills have won 13 out of their last 14 games against the Dolphins, and have won 11 straight home games. So I have the Bills winning and covering the 13.5 point spread. Then moving over to Sunday, we have the 2-0 Packers versus the 0-2 Browns. The Packers are coming off a 27-18 win against the Commanders on Thursday Night Football. And in that game, Jordan Love went 19 of 31, 292 yards and 2 touchdowns. Then Josh Jacobs had 84 yards rushing and a touchdown. And Tucker Kraft led the team with 6 receptions, 124 yards and a touchdown. And the defense was incredible in this one, having 4 sacks and holding the Commanders to 230 yards. But Jaden Reed did fracture his collarbone and will miss 6 to 8 weeks. And then for the Browns, they're coming off a 41-17 loss against the Ravens, and Joe Flacco really struggled in this game, going 25 of 45, 199 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. Then on the Browns' last drive, they put in Dylan Gabriel, and he looked really good, going 3 of 3 for 19 yards and got his first career touchdown. And Quinshon Judkins, in his NFL debut, led the team with 61 yards rushing and averaged 6.1 yards per carry. And despite giving up 41 points, the Browns defense played very good in this game. All game long, the Browns offense and special teams just kept setting up the defense in bad situations, because the Browns ended up with 3 sacks and held the Ravens to just 242 yards, and also held the Ravens to 45 yards rushing on 2.1 yards a carry. But I have the Packers winning and covering the 8.5 point spread. Then we have the 2-0 Bengals versus the 1-1 Vikings. The Bengals are coming off a 31-27 win over the Jaguars, but Joe Burrow did get injured in this game, and he has turf toe, and it will require surgery, so he's gonna miss minimum 3 months of the season. So for now, it's gonna be Jake Browning, and in this game, Jake Browning went 21-32 with 241 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. And Jamar Chase had a massive game with 14 receptions, 165 yards, and a touchdown. And then for the Vikings, they're coming off a 22-6 loss against the Falcons, and there was only 1 touchdown scored in the entire game. And across the 2 teams, there were 7 field goals. And JJ McCarthy really struggled in his second game, going 11-21, 158 yards and 2 interceptions, and was sacked 6 times. And he's now expected to miss 2 to 4 weeks with a high ankle sprain. So this is going to be a backup quarterback matchup of Jake Browning versus Carson Wentz. But both backups have it easier than most teams would, since the Vikings have Justin Jefferson, which he had 3 receptions for 81 yards in this game, and the Bengals have Jamar Chase. But the Vikings do have one of the best defenses in the NFL, and that's why I had the Vikings winning and covering the 2.5 point spread. Then we have the 1-1 Steelers versus the 1-1 Patriots. The Steelers are coming off a 31-17 loss against the Seahawks, and in that game, Aaron Rodgers went 18 of 33, a touchdown and 2 interceptions. Then Jaylen Warren had 48 yards rushing and 4 receptions for 86 yards. And on defense, they had 2 sacks and 2 interceptions, but they did allow 31 points and 395 yards. Then for the Patriots, in their win against the Dolphins, Drake May was excellent, going 19 of 23, 230 yards and 2 touchdowns, while also having 31 yards rushing and a rushing touchdown. And Ramondre Stevenson led them in both rushing yards and receiving yards, with 54 on the ground and 5 receptions for 88. And on defense, they ended up with 5 sacks and an interception. So far this season, the Steelers' defense has really struggled. I really like how the Patriots looked this past weekend, so I had the Patriots winning and covering the 1.5 point spread. Then we have the 2-0 Colts versus the 0-2 Titans. The Colts are coming off a very close win, 29-28 against the Broncos. Originally, they missed the game-winning field goal, but there was a penalty for leverage on the defense, so they got another chance and ended up walking it off. And Daniel Jones has looked great. In this game, he was 23 of 34, 316 yards and a touchdown, and also had a rushing touchdown. Then Jonathan Taylor had 165 rushing yards, and the rookie tight end Tyler Warren led the team with 4 receptions for 79 yards. And he's looked amazing so far, with already 11 receptions for 155 yards on the season. And I know it's very early, but through his first 2 games, he's on pace for 1,300 yards. And shockingly, Daniel Jones is currently on pace for just under 5,000 yards. Then for the Titans, they're coming off a 33-19 loss against the Rams. Cam Ward in that game went 19 of 33 with 175 yards and a touchdown and was sacked 5 times. And overall in the season, in his first 2 games, he's already been sacked 11 times. Then Tony Pollard had 92 rushing yards, and Calvin Ridley had 3 receptions for 57 yards. And just overall, this Titans team has holes all over the roster and are just flat out not a good team. So I had the Colts winning and covering the 3.5 point spread. Then we got the 0-2 Texans versus the 1-1 Jaguars. The Texans are coming off a 20-19 loss against the Buccaneers on Monday Night Football. And in that game, CJ Stroud was 13 of 24, 207 yards and a touchdown. Then Nick Chubb had 12 carries for 43 yards and a touchdown, and that touchdown was for 25 yards. And Nico Collins led them with 3 receptions, 52 yards and a touchdown. And on their defense, they had 4 sacks, but they gave up 360 yards. Then for the Jaguars, in their loss against the Bengals, Trevor Lawrence went 24 of 42, 271 yards, 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. Then Travis Etienne had 71 yards rushing and is already up to 214 yards, which is second in the NFL. Then Parker Washington had 5 receptions for 76 yards, and their defense had 3 sacks and 3 interceptions. But I think the Texans are going to bounce back after a rough 2 weeks and get their first win of the season and cover the 1.5 point spread. Then we have the 1-1 Falcons versus the 0-2 Panthers. In the Falcons' win over the Vikings, Michael Penix Jr. was 13 of 21, 135 yards, and no touchdowns and no interceptions. Then Bijan Robinson led the team with 143 yards rushing, and overall as a team they had 218 yards rushing, and Drake London had 3 receptions for 49 yards. And their defense was incredible in this game, with 6 sacks and 2 interceptions, while also holding the Vikings to 6 points and giving up just 198 yards. Then for the Panthers, they're coming off a 27-22 loss against the Cardinals, and the Panthers' offense was pretty good in this one. But when I opened up this box score, I was shocked to see Bryce Young throwing 55 times. He was 35 of 55 for 328 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception, and they didn't run the ball good at all. And as a team, they had 49 yards and averaged 2.6 yards a carry. But on the receiving side, Tetairoa McMillan had 6 receptions for 100 yards. But my only concern this week is the Panthers' defense. And with the way the Falcons ran the ball this past week, I think Bijan Robinson's going to have another massive day. And I had the Falcons winning, but I think the Panthers are going to keep it close and cover the 5.5 point spread. Then we had the 2-0 Rams versus the 2-0 Eagles. In the Rams win over the Titans, Matt Stafford was 23 of 33, 298 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Then Puka Nacua had a 45-yard rushing touchdown and had 8 receptions for 91 yards. But Davante Adams led them with 6 receptions for 106 yards and a touchdown. And the Rams defense played very well with 5 sacks and holding the Titans to 252 yards. But the Eagles show no signs of cooling down after their Super Bowl win, starting out the season 2-0 by winning 20-17 against the Chiefs. And in this game, Jalen Hurts was 15 of 22 for 101 yards, and Saquon Barkley had 88 yards rushing and a touchdown, and Devontae Smith had 4 receptions for 53 yards. And this is going to be one of the best games of the week, and I think it's going to be very close. But I have the Eagles winning, but I have the Rams covering the 3.5 point spread. Then we had the 0-2 Jets versus the 2-0 Buccaneers. In the Jets' loss against the Bills, Justin Fields left the game early with a concussion, and Tyrod Taylor went 7 of 11, 56 yards and a touchdown, and Garrett Wilson led the team with 4 receptions and 50 yards. And their defense didn't play good, giving up 403 yards and 30 points. Then for the Buccaneers, in their win against the Texans, on the final drive of the game, Baker Mayfield led them on an 80-yard drive, and it ended in a 2-yard rushing touchdown for Rachaad White. And Baker Mayfield went 25 of 38, 215 yards and 2 touchdowns, and was sacked 4 times. And so far this season, he has 5 touchdowns and no interceptions. Then Bucky Irving had 71 yards rushing and 6 receptions for 50 yards, and their defense had 3 sacks and held the Texans to 266 yards. I think this one could be a blowout, and I have the Buccaneers winning and covering the 6.5 point spread. Then we had the 1-1 Raiders versus the 1-1 Commanders. The Raiders are coming off a 20-9 loss against the Chargers, and in that game, Geno Smith went 24 of 43, 180 yards, and 3 interceptions. Ashton Genty had 43 yards rushing, and Jacoby Meyer led the team with 6 receptions for 68 yards. Then for the Commanders, in their loss against the Packers, Jaden Daniels was 24 of 42, 200 yards and 2 touchdowns, and they couldn't run the ball at all in this game, having 19 carries for 51 yards. Then Zach Ertz had 6 receptions for 64 yards and a touchdown. But Jaden Daniels is currently questionable with a knee injury for this week, but is listed day to day for practice, but so far it looks like he might play. So right now I have the Commanders winning, but I have the Raiders covering the 3.5 point spread. Then we had the 1-1 Broncos versus the 2-0 Chargers. In the Broncos' loss against the Colts, Bo Nix was 22 of 30, 206 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. Then J.K. Dobbins had 76 yards and a rushing touchdown. And Troy Franklin had 8 receptions for 89 yards and a touchdown. And their defense struggled a lot, giving up 26 first downs and 473 yards. Then for the Chargers, in their win against the Raiders, Justin Herbert went 19 of 27, 242 yards and 2 touchdowns, while also leading the team with 31 yards rushing. Then Quentin Johnston had 3 receptions, 71 yards and a touchdown, and that touchdown was for 60 yards. Both of these teams have really good defenses, and I think this could be a pretty low scoring game, but I have the Chargers winning and covering the 2.5 point spread. Then we have the 0-2 Saints versus the 1-1 Seahawks. The Saints are coming off a 26-21 loss against the 49ers, and Spencer Rattler in this game was 25 of 34, 207 yards and 3 touchdowns. Then Alvin Kamara had 99 yards running, and Chris Olave led them with 6 receptions for 54 yards. Then for the Seahawks, in their win against the Steelers, Sam Darnold was 22 of 33, 295 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. And Kenneth Walker had a very good game with 105 yards rushing and a touchdown, and averaged 8.1 yards a carry. And Jackson Smith and Jigba had 8 receptions for 103 yards. And the Seahawks defense had 3 sacks and 2 interceptions, while holding the Steelers to 267 yards. So I have the Seahawks winning and covering the 7.5 point spread. Then the 2-0 Cardinals versus the 2-0 49ers. And this could be one of the best games of the week. In the Cardinals' win over the Panthers, Kyler Murray went 17 of 25, 220 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. Then James Conner had 34 yards rushing and a touchdown. And Trey McBride had 6 receptions for 78 yards. And on defense, they had 3 sacks and an interception, but they did give up 26 first downs and 352 yards. Then for the 49ers, in their win against the Saints, Mac Jones went 26 of 39, 279 yards and 3 touchdowns. Then Christian McCaffrey had 13 carries for 55 yards and 6 receptions for 52 yards and a touchdown. And Juwan Jennings led them with 5 receptions, 89 yards and a touchdown. And Mac Jones is going to be starting for them again this week. And I could see this game going either way. And I really like this Cardinals team, and I think they're going to win. Then we have the 1-1 Cowboys versus the 0-2 Bears. And the Cowboys are coming off a shootout win in overtime, 40-37 against the Giants. And this game had a crazy ending, with the Giants scoring a 48-yard touchdown to Malik Neighbors with 25 seconds in the fourth quarter to take a 3-point lead. Then as zeros hit the clock, Brandon Aubrey drilled a 64-yard field goal to tie it and send it to overtime. And then both teams went back and forth in overtime, but the Cowboys ended up kicking another 46-yard field goal with zeros on the clock to win it. And between the two teams, there was over 980 yards of offense in this game. Dak Prescott was 38 of 52 with 361 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Then Javonte Williams had 97 yards rushing and a touchdown. And CeeDee Lamb had 9 receptions for 112 yards. Then for the Bears, they're coming off a blowout loss, 52-21 against the Lions. Caleb Williams was 19 of 30, 207 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception, and was sacked 4 times. DeAndre Swift had 63 yards rushing and a touchdown, and Rome Odunze had 7 receptions for 128 yards and 2 touchdowns. And with the way the Cowboys offense has been playing, I have the Cowboys winning. Then on Sunday Night Football, we have the 0-2 Chiefs versus the 0-2 Giants. In the Chiefs' loss against the Eagles, Patrick Mahomes was 16 of 29, 187 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. And he also led the team in rushing yards with 66 and a touchdown. And surprisingly, he already has 123 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns on the season. And with that many yards through the first 2 games, he's on pace for actually 1,000 rushing yards this season. But I still don't see that continuing for the rest of the season. Then in the Giants' loss against the Cowboys, Russell Wilson was 30 of 41, 450 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. Cam Scatterboo had 45 yards rushing and his first career touchdown. Then on the receiving side, Malik Neighbors led the team with 9 receptions, 167 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Then Wan'Dale Robinson had 8 receptions for 142 yards and a touchdown. But I have the Chiefs snapping their losing streak and getting their first win of the season, but I have the Giants covering the 6.5 point spread. Then finally, on Monday Night Football, we have the 1-1 Lions versus the 1-1 Ravens. In the Lions' win against the Bears, Jared Goff was 23 of 28, 334 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Jahmyr Gibbs had 94 yards rushing and a touchdown, and Amon-Ra St. Brown had 9 receptions, 115 yards, and 3 touchdowns. And on defense, they had 4 sacks and an interception. Then for the Ravens, in their win against the Browns, Lamar Jackson played great, going 19 of 29, 225 yards, and 4 passing touchdowns. But Derrick Henry was held to just 23 yards rushing at 2.1 yards a carry, and overall the Ravens had 45 rushing yards as a team. And Zay Flowers continues to look great in his 3rd season, with 7 receptions for 75 yards, and already has 218 on the season. So I have the Ravens winning, but I have the Lions covering the 5.5 point spread. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. Goodbye.